There we go. We've got an all-star analyst panel to break down the results. So closing bell comes right back. We don't watch ads here. No watching ads. Here we go.
On the market, Mac revenues grew to $10.85 billion, more than $1 billion, more than
Apple up.
Services also hitting a record up to $19.5 billion. That's also nearly $1 billion
there we
more
go.
than anticipated. Now, looking at total cash on hand, that number has risen to $202.6 billion, up from $190.5 billion. Apple shares now trading up nearly 2%. Guys?
Julia, thanks so much for that. I have to say, a stunning quarter, all things considered, a big beat on revenue, a nice beat on the bottom line, and broad as well. Only iPad missed all the other lines with comfortable beats led by iPhone. Let's discuss further.
Welcome to the live stream. Feel free to ask questions, comments.
Colin Gillis from Chatham Road Partners, all with us. Mike, of course, with us as well. Dan Ives, I come to you first of all. What is your take on these numbers?
You should frame this quarter in Cupertino. I mean, if you look at, given the chip shortage, to have a number that's called a $5 billion beat, and especially those iPhones, that would have been another $6 billion beat if not for the chip shortage, all around from margins across the board. It just shows Teflon-like in terms of navigating the chip shortage. This is beyond what bulls were hoping for. Obviously, it comes down to guidance. But this is a life raft in a market storm, a huge quarter from Cook and Cupertino.
Mike Santoli makes a big difference as well to broad sentiment and valuations overnight.
Well, it does. I mean, obviously, what you're paying for is steadiness. You're paying for $100 billion in net income per year. That's what they're on pace for again. So I do think it is very solid across the board. I'm not sure that Apple, because it is so unique and so dominant, has really coattails in terms of the rest of tech sort of taking heart in their performance. Apple is as Apple does, as opposed to necessarily being a direct bellwether, but it's certainly not going to hurt sentiment that this operating environment was good enough for them to perform like this.
Strong sales growth across the board. Let's get back to Julia Boorstin for more on Apple's results. Julia.
Well, Sarah, I spoke to Apple CEO Tim Cook about this record quarter. Now, the company didn't give any guidance, but I asked him about sales trends over the course of the quarter for that better than expected iPhone growth in particular. On iPhone demand, Tim Cook told me, quote, the last 2 weeks of the quarter were the best 2 weeks for iPhone customer demand during the quarter. He said that's not odd because that is associated with gift giving, but it bodes well to the momentum. We grew by 9% for the quarter, which we were proud of, and that's despite having supply constraints during the quarter. I also asked Tim Cook about the biggest pain points for the supply chain, which he said is constraints on chip supply, particularly with legacy nodes, that has the largest impact on iPads. He told me, quote, the good news, if there is good news in here, is that the December quarter was worse than the previous quarter. We were projecting March to be better than the December quarter, and that's in terms of supply constraints. I also asked him about how they're reacting to inflationary pressures if they plan to raise prices. He said that they try to price their products based on their value that they deliver. It sounds like we could hear more about those inflationary pressures on the call, and that call does start at the top of the hour. Guys?
Julia Boorstin, very valuable. Thank you. Up about 2% after hours. Colin, so for didn't give guidance, Cook gave Julia some good color as to what they were seeing the last 2 weeks. The best for demand, makes sense with gift giving, but does bode well for momentum. What, do you expect them to get into more detail as far as the outlook, or Apple just doesn't do that anymore?
They don't do that anymore, but what we do know is that clearly there's still strong demand for the iPhone. And what's even more impressive is that we're seeing Apple and Tim Cook.
Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for the likes. Appreciate it.
Driving those margins higher, right? Taking advantage of the consistent form factors. That 43.8% gross margin, that's a fantastic print. And so demand is not an issue for Apple, particularly for the iPhone.
What's your take on this performance? I know, as Dan and I said, we're waiting for the guidance, but you just can't really complain with what they did in that past quarter.
Not at all. The quarter's fantastic. Now, you do have to be a little concerned that you're getting into more difficult compares with the March and the June quarter. And, there may be some short-term price, volatility. But if you're a longer-term holder, there's nothing that's broken with Apple. There's nothing wrong with this company. They continue to fire away on all cylinders. It would be nice to see some new products, some new services get layered in just to help, continue to drive that revenue momentum. But, the company's executing.
The services number was a beat at $19.5 billion, Steph. The Greater China revenues up 21%, also impressive given what's been going on in that region. What stands out to you?
Well, I have to be honest, I'm not surprised they had a strong quarter because we had been hearing all throughout the quarter that the supply chain situation was easing from weeks to days, right, in terms of availability. So, and the other important note is last quarter they got hit $6 billion in total revenue because of the supply chain, and they guided higher for this quarter. So you knew that they were kind of conservative to begin with. That being said, it was a great print. I like that it was very broad-based. Love the gross margin story and cash flow. My goodness, $202 billion. So you now know they're going to announce a big buyback in April. That's coming, right? And it's probably going to be something like another $90 billion.
Tesla stock crashed $100 today. That is crazy.
So that's why this company is such a defensive position, good balance sheet, a 1.65 billion plus install base. You've got some products coming. We don't know what AR, VR in terms of the iPhone, the next iPhone and what that's going to do, but that's certainly positive. And services, yeah, it continues to hum. So I don't know if we're going to get guidance, guys. I'd be surprised if we do, but we all know it's against tough compares. So I almost think that we'll look through it.
Dan Ives, how significant was it what Julia told us that Tim Cook was seeming to guide to her that the supply chain issues got worse in the past quarter, but will get better in the quarter coming forward?
Yeah, I was actually going to hit on that. I think that's something, not just for Apple, but for the market and for tech tomorrow. Those comments, which Cook will talk about, I think it's the most important thing from this quarter. Supply chain getting better for Apple. Remember, they're at the front of the line. They have the best view. That's huge, especially after what we've seen with Tesla and others in terms of the supply chain. You combine this with what going into the next year, that was the biggest concern for Apple, especially with right now 250 million iPhones that haven't been upgraded in 3.5 years. I think this is just a 1-2 punch of good news for a market that really needed it.
Steph, you've also been looking at some of the catalysts for the stock, calendar items like this, like a September launch, but what else are you watching?
Yeah, no, I mean, you get the capital return is going to come in April. That's going to be a big one. As I mentioned, I think it could be as high as 90 billion. Maybe it's more, who knows? But especially if they think their stock price is really cheap. And then June, you get the WWDC conference, which is always interesting. You get nuggets out from each company there. And then, of course, the September, the next launch. So I think that's what we're going to be looking forward to. That's why I think second quarter, I don't know if we're really going to pay attention to the guidance. As I mentioned, tough comps, I think numbers are where they probably are going to settle out at. But look, this is a really good story. It's for a portfolio manager like myself, I'm looking for kind of just defensive kind of companies, but I want to play in the tech space, right? And this is perfect. Other than it trades a little bit rich at 28 times forward, but deservedly so. It's almost like a consumer staples company. I think my friend Jim Cramer talks about that all the time in terms of the comparison, but they're very steady and they're doing an amazing job and everybody wants their phones and products.
What Colin could go wrong on the earnings call or surprise people?
But what we want to hear is we want to see where the iPhone demand is coming from, right? Historically, over the last few quarters, we've seen strong demand both from the upgrade cycle, the replacement cycle, as well as new customers. So any commentary around people coming into the ecosystem is something that we're going to watch out for. And then in terms of supply chain issues, right, I would comment that, if you're a supplier to Apple, you're going to take care of them. So positive commentary from Apple about easing of supply chain woes may not translate to other companies that are, further down on the pecking order.
What about you, Dan? What do you want to hear on the call?
Look, Cook's a tactician when it comes to these conference calls. He's had the golden touch, giving investors focus on, as Colin talked about, the supply chain. But China, that's the linchpin of growth that we're seeing in terms of iPhone demand, giving, I think, the street more comfort there, combined with services. I think services alone is worth 1.5 trillion. That's the key. This is a stock the street, I think, it's really going to, absorb and digest.
All right, I'm going to end this live stream with some words of advice. If you want to make some money, wow, look at that. Tesla down 104 bucks. Just do the opposite of Jim Cramer. You will always make money if you do the opposite of Jim Cramer.